So as you can see, with our lever installed and the factory four-wheel drive lever removed, you can basically mount this lever anywhere you want to. I kind of like the position where it's at right now. You can kind of reach up with your thumb. You can hit four-wheel drive, bring it back pretty quickly. You go to 4 if you need to go to diff lock. Just take it a little further. You see you get the two 4D marker indicators on the lever. So I've got it up on jack stands right now to just show you how we're in the two-wheel drive mode, to just show you the functionality of it. You see we're in two-wheel drive, so we're going to flip it to four-wheel drive. You see now we're in four-wheel drive, then we're going to go to diff lock. And we're fully locked. So back to 4. You see we've came out of diff lock, and then back to 2, back in two-wheel drive. Now with the key on, some have asked about the indicator light. When it's in four-wheel drive, you won't have an indicator light. You'll have this indicator and you'll know you're in four-wheel drive. And when you go to diff lock, your indicator light will come on. And to us that was more important, knowing when your diff lock's on than knowing when your four-wheel drive's on. So you don't want to ride in diff lock. You'll know you're in diff lock, your wheels will be hard to steer and whatnot. You come back out, your light will go back out, and you're in two-wheel drive. A lot of folks have been asking about diff lock on these. It is an option to put the electronic diff lock on them from the factory, but from what I understand, it's a pricey option. But it is an important feature that most people want. So what we did is came up with a kit on how to install this diff lock on the Kodiak 700. So today I'll be going over how to take the differential out and put the kit in and get everything going. So what I have laid out here is my tools you'll need. It's pretty easy install, just basic hand tools. I've got my jack, 2 jack stands, a little stool to set on. You don't really need air tools, but sure makes life a lot better if you have them. I've got a pry bar here. Use that to line up the differential when you're putting it back in. You can use a big screwdriver too. Air ratchet, hammer. Got my side cutters and a flathead there just to get the cotter pins out of the tie rod ends and such. Got a 27mm socket here for the hub nut. Got a 17mm socket there for the lug nuts. Another 17. Got a 10. Got a 12, 14, and 17. And I've got this. This is just to help get the hub nuts off. They'll be crimped down. You need something to stick in there and kind of pick that up where you can spin it off there. You'll see that in the video. And for wrenches, I've got a 14, a 12, and a 17. And then the little extension's nice when you're taking out the differential bolts. So now that we've got that, we'll go ahead and get started here. There's a lot of different ways to take out the differential. I'm going to show you the easiest way without taking the actual ball joints and stuff loose. The only thing we'll be taking loose is the shocks, the upper and lower A-arms on one side, one A-arm on the other, and then the tie rod ends. So it's a little bit easier to do it this way. I'll go ahead and pull my wheel off. Cover off there. Kind of get here where you can see. See there what I mean? How that hub nut's crimped. I usually take this and kind of drive it in there just to get it up a little bit, get it off there. I'll take my 27mm, throw on my impact. Come right off. Towel here for parts. Hub nut. And next I'm going to pop this tie rod end off. There's a cotter key in it. Sometimes you can save them, sometimes you can't. Looks like we'll be able to save this one. That's a 17mm there to get that tie rod end off. That compressor's going to kick on any minute. What I'll do is back it down a little bit. You probably have to hit it with a hammer. You don't want to mess up your thread, so keep the nut on there and just tap it a little bit. Pop it up, that way you don't bugger up your threads. Pop your tie rod out. I like to put all my nuts back on here just so I know where they go and don't lose anything while you're taking everything apart. Okay, now we're going to pop off this brake caliper. It's going to kind of just hang during the process here. It's 12mm. You shouldn't need brakes on a 2016 just yet, but now is a good time to check and replace them. If you do, you're already there. These are brand new still. Alright, I take these two 10mm bolts out here, because when you pull your A-arm, you're going to want some slack. You're going to want to feed this brake line through. Let's go ahead and pull those 10mm bolts out. Again, I just kind of screw them back in so you don't lose them. I'll kind of get that out of the way for now. Just kind of let it hang there. Now I'm going to pull the shock off. It's a 17mm nut and a 14mm bolt. Need a 17mm wrench. Keep up that nut. Pull that out. Stick it back in there. Same thing, 14, 17 over at the top. Get the shock out of the way. Lay that right there. Now, at this point, what we want to do is take the upper A-arm loose. So you got a 14 and a 17 up there again. axle out, push it in, and give it a good tug. Like that. And sometimes give it a good push and pull. There we go. Got it out. And that's all we're going to do to this side for now. Alright. Now we're going to pull this wheel off. Same thing here. Only thing different about this side is we're going to take the lower A-arm off this one and the upper A-arm, because as you'll see, the diff lock, or the differential bolt, I'm sorry, it won't come out this side. It's going to hit your lower A-arm, so you got to remove that. So, tie rod in, the cotter key in there. So we'll be able to save this one too. Set that aside there, I don't lose it. Again, get this crimped hub nut off here. Just like that. It's a little easier than the other one. Helps if you have a nice sharp tool you can drive in there. Just hub nut off. It'll be pretty tight, so it really helps to have an impact there when you're doing that. Set that aside. Now we pull this brake caliper off. It's going to be at 12. Back in there so we don't lose them. Now, I'll take this tie rod in loose, 17 millimeters. This thing's coming apart easy so far. Jinx myself here. Like I said, keep that nut on, give it a tap. Most of the time it'll pop right up pretty easy. There it goes. Tie rod end out. Now then, pull this off, set that aside. Now we're going to take in 10 millimeter bolts out there on the brake line so we can let it kind of dangle. In place. Now 14, 17, take the shock off. pretty easy. Kind of remember how they go in there. Kind of alternated. One goes in from that side, and the other one goes in from this side. We'll set that aside. Now at this point, we're ready to take our control arms off. Again, 14, 17, 14 socket, 17 inch. Socket on that one. We can get there. Pop the axle out. Okay, now put there to kind of brace it now. Axle popped out. Now, at this point, we got both arms here off. Pop that one out and move this out of the way. You know, you don't want to put too much pressure on your brake line there, and you know, I think it'll be fine like it is. So at this point, we've got everything out, we're ready to pull the diff. Now, on the diff, there's 3 bolts. You got one on this side, one on the other side, and then one long one right here in the middle. But before we get to that, we're going to scoot around the other side and pull the cone off. 1/4 inch 10 deep socket in order to do it. And you're going to get gear oil coming out of this thing. You can drain it beforehand. And either way, it's going to come out right here when we pull this cone off. I'll put something under it to get the nuts out. So there's three 10mm nuts on here. Just break them loose. Probably get them out by hand. Got them all loose. See? Pull them out by hand there. Keep up with them. Now bolt that back on once we get the kit installed. Good time to change your gear oil too, if you need to. Seals and everything, really good time to do all that. If you shouldn't need to, wouldn't do a bike, but a lot of folks asking about that sensor. That's just there's a little button in there that grounds out when you put the four-wheel drive lever in four-wheel drive, and it keeps your light on. So let me get a pan. Let gear oil drain into here so it doesn't make a mess on the floor. Brand new Yamaha lube. Whew. Stuff's pricey. I usually just run a 80-90 in my Valvoline, you know, or Super Tech. You know, try to change it out pretty frequently. So, okay. At this point, we're gonna kind of just let this dude hang here, out of the way. Put it right here. It's not in your way. Now we're gonna pull the diff out. So we got 14 on that side. We'll go ahead and do that. This is where your extension comes in. Kind of handy. You can get in there a little bit better. These will be pretty tight. There's one. We'll set that right there. Then we're going to go around the other side and do the same thing. Set that right there. Now, for that long bolt, if you got a friend to help you, it's a little bit easier. You can usually take a 14, get it to where it'll go on there. Like that. Also, you can pull your vent tube off. Kind of just stick that up out of the way there. 14 back on there. Should hold itself in place enough to get it broke loose if you're doing it by yourself. happens. Fell in my oil pan. Okay, at this point, but the differential's free. Pull this bolt out the other side. The differential's just sitting in there. That's the long bolt there. Remember what side it went in on. You won't be able to get it in on this side because of the control arm. Now, at this point, we can go ahead and pull the differential out. I'm going to pull it out from the other side just because I've got a little bit more room. Now that drive shaft, there's a spring on the engine side. Make sure that doesn't pop out and you lose that. As long as you know it's in there, you can take your finger and kind of take that boot and push it back. Makes it a little easier to get off. And this is where your pry bar may come in handy. Kind of get up under that differential. You want to just push it forward like that. Pick up on it. You can see it's already came out the motor. So you can see there, see that spring, mine stayed in there. And you also got a little piece of rubber there that will pop out, so make sure that stays in there. Just put your drive shaft aside. Now we're going to just lift the diff out. Again, you're going to get some oil spilling out if you didn't drain your differential. Now, you got the differential out. Now, what I'll do is take it, let's let it sit there for a minute and drain. Now it just drained out. There's that rubber piece that I was talking about. It actually did come out. You want to hold on to that. I'm making a mess here, so it sticks into that hole. Oh. Yeah. Sure you drain the diff. Either way, we'll still get it. So, at this point, I get 12 millimeter. Split your diff open. We'll just let that gear oil go where it wants to. Little love tap there. You don't want to stick any kind of screwdriver or anything in there if you can help it. Damage that flange on there. Okay, so pick this up off there. Easy peasy. See there, this thing's nice and clean. Try to keep all the dirt and everything out of it, and make sure your hands are clean when you're doing it too. What you're going to do is pick this ring gear up out of here and the carrier. Sometimes the shims will come out with it. This one didn't. You want to make sure if they do that you put them back exactly like they came out. That's what gives you your spacing on your ring and your pinion there. So we set this aside here. It's a clean shirt. Now what we're going to do, you want to keep everything clean on this at all times. What we're going to do is take this bearing off and just remember which way it came off to, and you're going to put it back on our carrier the same way. This is what you'll find in our kit. This is a new ring carrier made out of the same steel, hardened steel as a Yamaha one. It's just a little bit different to enable the diff lock. So what we'll do is this bearing will go on there, on this piece. So the bearing typically comes off pretty easy. If you've got a bearing separator, you can use that. I don't mind giving it a little tap on each side, and it comes off fairly easy. Don't beat on it too much. Okay, and remember, so it fell off that way. So we're going to put it on our carrier that way. Same thing, just give it a little tap. It went down on there, so got that done. Now, what we're basically doing is replacing this carrier with this carrier. So we're going to take these bolts out. These are usually pretty tight. Just to speed things up, I like to put an impact on them. That's a 12 millimeter. As clean as you can. Set them aside. Set this aside. Now, this ring gear will pull off here, and that's what you're left with right there. So, at this point, I'm going to take a round punch. Go ahead and knock this pin out. Get that out. Set your roll pin aside. At this point, you're going to push out this pin. Take out your spider gears. Only one way it'll go back in. The hole lines up with the hole there, so you put it in that way. Now, spider gear will come off. They just fall out of there basically. And then this piece will come out. And then that's the old carrier. This is our new carrier. What you're gonna do is just drop this down in there, like that. Now before you do that, take you a dab of gear oil. Smear down in there. Smear on this, just to keep everything lubed up real nice, especially on the face over here where it's riding. Drop that down in there. Now, put your spider gears back. Now, back with the pin. Same thing, holes over here. We're going to stick our pin in there. You have to wiggle it a little bit to get it in there. It'll go. Try to keep it lined up with your hole. Just push it in. Okay. Now, take your roll pin. Put it back in there. Just drive it flush. Now, it's in there. Make sure everything's turning right. It is. So now, back together with the ring gear. Now, there's only one way this will go. You'll see there's a blank there. It's going to set just like that. Now, I'm going to grab some Loctite. There may be a torque for these in the manual. Not sure. But I usually just put some Loctite on them and put an impact on them, and I hadn't had any trouble at all. I'll try to hand thread, or I will hand thread all these in before you start impacting or ratcheting away on them. You want to make sure they're all lined up good. Just start them all by hand. Well, you know they're in there. Okay, they're all threaded in. We can take this factory carrier and set it aside. Won't be needing that anymore. Now, I'll try to, you know, alternate them. Get them in there. Okay, I'm happy with it. Now, since this point we can put it back together. Now, since our shims stayed in there, see the shims there? It's like there's two of them there. Four-wheel drive slide gear. Now, again, take your little gear oil on that bearing, and that bearing's gonna go down in here. Spinning there. So verify that everything's sliding in and going in. It is. It looks nice and straight. So at this point, go ahead and put this pinion side back on. And again, there's only one way it's going to go. Tap. Got it in there, okay? Give it a good turn. Hear any funny noises? Push your slide gear over. A lot of people say, oh, it's stuck, it ain't working right, you know, even on a factory diff. That's completely normal. Sometimes you're going to get it with your finger. Sometimes it's going to go all the way over. That's diff lock, four-wheel drive, and two-wheel drive. Sometimes, see now, I can't get it over, and that's fine. The differential's not messed up. That's completely normal. Under the tension of the cable in this particular system, or the motor in an electronic system, that's going to go over. Don't worry about that. So that's normal. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put this differential back in after we put these bolts in there. Got to have your bolts. Same thing here, you kind of want to alternate these. The compressor's probably going to kick on here. Alternate you before you tighten them up. Now, differential back together. Just set it there, and we're going to get around on the other side before we put it back in. While we have more room, we're going to work on this cable assembly. Got it. So, just loosen that up. Now, we're going to do away with this whole assembly here, basically. You take your Phillips head and get that snap ring off there. Or not a Phillips, a flathead, I'm sorry. Pop right out. It's almost there. That whole assembly will pop off. You can get this off here. Just like that. That'll come down. You can save this, you know, if you feel the need. As far as the spring and stuff is what I'm talking about. We'll be putting this back on with a different bracket. We can put that puller assembly on after the differential is in. It's no problem. So, put the differential back in. The drive shaft there. Remember your spring. What I like to do is put this end in first. Kind of stick it in the engine. There. You can take that rubber, push it on there. It kind of helps to hold it on there. Just set your. After you make sure you tighten everything up, everything's turning smoothly. Just take your differential, put it back in there. Should go in fairly easy. Don't smash your hands or anything like that. And take and line up the spline so you're on your drive shaft, and then see it pop right in. Take that rubber, push over that, and then this is kind of where your pry bar I was talking about comes in handy. Especially if you're by yourself working. Push that differential enough to get those bolts in. Now on this other one, we're going to take our 14mm wrench. If you've got a buddy, have him hold it. If not, stick it in there. Stick it on a nut. Just kind of let it sit there. And it'll hold itself enough where you can get it tightened up from this side. Make sure you get that good and tight. Okay. Now we can start putting it back together. Everything's in. You can verify if you want to start it up, jack all four wheels up, put it in gear. You can manually put it in four-wheel drive, make sure everything's going in. I'm pretty confident everything's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it back together. So at this point, take your axle, pop your axle back in. Again, when you're going in, give it a little hammering motion there. It should pop right in. Now, this can be a little tricky, but if you take your axle, put it in the hub first, makes it a lot easier. Let's see how them washers fell off. Want to make sure that stays on there. Now, at this point, go ahead and put our nuts and bolts back in for our A-arms. Remember the ones where the washers went on top. Okay, that one. Got that one. Doesn't hurt to put a little grease on those bolts. There's still some on there from the factory. I'm just gonna put mine back in. They're pretty slicked up. At this point, just raise up your these are the ones with the washers, so make sure you got your washer on there. Okay. Put our nuts back on. Stick your tie rod back in there, just hand tied it. Make sure you put the castle down on it. Collar key. Now, at this point, bring that up through. Remember how that went? Brake caliper. Screw that back on. Put it hand tight. You come back and tighten it. Now, put your disc back on. Hub nut on. Put it hand tight. The brake pads may or may not have closed up just enough to where you can't get them back on the disc. If that happens, take you a big flathead, stick in there, and kind of just twist it. It'll push that piston in enough to where you can get it on there. Now, kind of need a shock on there. lift up on the shock. Lift up on the, get it in there. Okay. Now that's complete, with the exception of tightening everything up and putting the cotter key back in the tie rod in. Move on back over to the other side and put it back together. This side will be a little bit quicker because you only had one A-arm off. Put your axle in first. Tie rod out of the way. Pull this up kind of out of the way. Splines lined up, give it a little thump. Pop it in there. Stretch this down enough to where you can get your axle in there. It's tight. It'll go. Just careful not to bugger up your threads on your axle there. You don't want that. Into the vent line. Pop that back on. That one in there. Don't forget your washers. Now, just 10mm bolts. Through around. Now, put your tie rod in, put her hand tight, castle down. Disc back on. Hub nut. This one closed in on me too. I'm going to take my flathead. Do the same thing. Just kind of stick it in there without messing up your pads, and right in the center. Give it a good twist, and it'll push that piston in enough to get it on. Now, two 12mm bolts. Screw them in. Shock on. Again, pick up on the shock. Now, everything's together with the exception of the cable puller, which we'll get to in a little bit. Now, so we can go ahead and tighten everything back up. We're going to go ahead and remove the factory full drive lever up here. Pull that little tie off there. Take you a 4mm Allen screw. Loosen that. There are some springs in here, so be careful. Don't want to lose it. Won't be needing it, but you may want to keep it. Now you got the springs in there for your detent balls. Once you get that out, I would set the springs and turn it over, and that's what you'll find that. Set that aside there, and then you pull. May have to get under and easier if you take this off to get the cable, the factory cable assembly out, instead of pulling that bigger part out. You can pull the smaller end out once you pull this cap off. You actually get your cable out of here like that. And set your parts aside there. Then that's all you've got left there. You can pull that through the bottom. Should be able to fairly easy. And there's your factory cable. And this is our new cable kit. Comes with a 3-position lever and a complete cable assembly to replace the factory assembly. So we'll go ahead and route this through. There's a hole in the plastic pod here. Go ahead and just route that through there. Route it in the front of the steering column. Okay, once you have that routed through, go ahead and mount this on the handlebars. You got a lock washer, and a nut. Go ahead and put it in a position that's comfortable to you. You can move it later. We like to have ours as close over to the hand grip as possible. It makes it real handy to take your thumb and put it into 4-wheel drive. So we'll go ahead and tighten this up. Now at this point, once you have your cable routed through, you should have everything tightened up with the exception of your or driver's side wheel. Just give you a little more room to work in there. So at this point, you're gonna see our cable assembly here. It'll look like this. You have 2 nuts, 2 washers, and if you remember, we went ahead and pulled this off earlier in the video. What we're gonna do is replace this portion here with our portion. It makes it easier if you take a set of vice strips and put on it, so you can take the tension off of it. And go ahead and loosen this nut up, and we're going to replace this piece with our piece. Now once you have our puller piece on, we can go ahead and install the cable assembly. You want to put 1 washer on top, slide the cable through, and then push the assembly up. And then you can tighten the other nut up, just hand tight. We found that the adjustment for this cable is about in the middle, about where it is now, and that's where it will come. But you want to keep your jack stands under here. Go ahead and run it through a couple cycles and make sure it's working right before you ride it. There's a rubber boot on there. Just go ahead and push that up. At this point, you can go ahead and stick your cable through there. Push up on that puller with your thumb. Kind of feed your cable in there. Just like that. And now we can go ahead and bolt this up. And before you do, your lever should be in 2-wheel drive. That's the way it came. You want to make sure your slide gear and the differential is all the way to the left in 2-wheel drive, and you're ready to bolt up. Just insert it straight in. We can go ahead and put our 3 10mm bolts back in it and tighten her down. Now once you have it tightened up, you can go ahead and put your indicator switch back on. You'll want to do a couple tests with it while it's up on jack stands to make sure everything's functioning. But other than that, when you get that going, the diff oil is the only thing you're liking. So put your diff oil in. Don't forget to do that. And go ahead and put your wheel back on and enjoy your new diff lock kit. So we think we covered everything in a video. If for some reason we missed something, feel free to give us a call if you have any questions at all about the install. It's pretty straightforward. I tried to take my time and go through all the steps. And, as always, we're here to help you if you run into anything. So thanks for watching.